Well, we continue our coverage around expectations of what will unfold tomorrow. Parliament, as things stand right now, expected then to debate the report of the Section 89 panel into the robbery at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala farm. But of course, there's also a meeting, we understand, by the programming committee, rather, that is going to be held tonight that will decide on whether that debate is still going to go ahead, as the President has now filed papers, as you heard from Aaron Bates, with the Constitutional Court. However, those papers have not been filed on an urgent basis. But in the papers, the President then also urging the Speaker not to go ahead with this sitting, as he believes that there are matters around the lawfulness of the work of the panel that need to be interrogated. Now, former Scopa chairperson Themba Godi is calling for the President to be held accountable. He joins us now. Mr. Godi, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. I wonder if I wanted to say, if you'd give us an opinion outside of the political hat that you wear from time to time, but your own impressions from the perspective of somebody that has served in Parliament for a long time at Scopa, and just the response of this, the response rather to this moment by Parliament. Well,
yeah, it is indeed a very interesting times we're in, so to speak. My take is that the panel report is an opinion sought by Parliament to assist it in holding the President accountable. And Parliament should be given the space to look at the advice that it has got, and then for Parliament to decide what course of action to take. So I think the steps taken by the President are premature and preemptive and puzzling in the context where the man claims that he is innocent of all the allegations made against him. Parliament, I would imagine, he would urge Parliament to create a platform where he could come and prove his innocence in public. But somehow he seemed to be taking measures that seem to delay or even avoid that process where he can prove his innocence.
Early in the day, during a media briefing for his organization, Julius Malema making the point that the President effectively is taking the Parliament to court for wanting to hold him accountable. Is that the same way you view it?
Well, my take is that the President is interfering in the work of Parliament, which is illegal. One party in Parliament has said the President must be impeached because it believes he has committed misconduct, he has violated the Constitution, and Parliament is trying to find its way towards taking a decision on that motion. And then the President seeks to interdict and interrupt that process. So for me, he's interfering with the work of Parliament. He should give Parliament the opportunity to do its work, and we take it up from there.
Of course, I haven't had a chance to read the submissions that is put before the Constitutional Court tonight, Mr. Godi, but based on what Aaron Bates was telling us earlier, the President quoting the very same judgment that was issued by the Constitutional Court in 2017 around exactly this issue of Parliament and accountability and whether or not Parliament fulfilled its role in holding the executive to account, the President acknowledging the importance of Parliament doing that work, but then further saying that he believes that if Parliament continued with entertaining this report and brought it to be tabled and discussed before it, that in fact would be a miscarriage of justice.
Well, I think the President has really not displayed high levels of, of honesty in dealing with critical matters of the public. So this is important. He wants to be held accountable. He wants to cooperate with all institutions that are looking into this matter. But at the same time, he wants to stop a process For me, it's not so much the details of his submission than the principle, which is that at where we are now, if he feels aggrieved by what the panel has arrived at, Parliament should afford him an opportunity where he can come in person, he can call his witnesses, from the Sudanese guy to Mr. Ndlovu to whoever, to come and give evidence that proves his innocence. So I don't understand why is it that he wants to clear his name, he continues to protest his innocence, but is doing everything to stop a process that would afford him an opportunity to prove his innocence.
Let's talk about the issue of accountability in as far as it relates to the work that MPs do. What are the options that are on the table for Parliament right now?
Now, look, the impeachment process of the President and that of the heads of Chapter 9 institutions are the same. Both the Constitution is the same process, it's not different. If Parliament has to impeach or remove any head of Chapter 9 institution, it needs a process, and that process has been adopted, and is the responsibility of Parliament to develop that process. It has done that process. It started with the Advocate Mkhwebane, and now it's coming to the President. Advocate Mkhwebane protested the innocence and has now gone to that committee to prove the innocence. And I might not be part of that committee, but clearly she's holding a ground against whatever allegations are being made against her. So I don't understand how the President wants to be held accountable, but at the same time runs to the court and seeks to be shielded from being held accountable. I mean, MPs have no other way to hold the executive to account than to trigger processes that will give them the opportunity to answer for themselves and say, why are there these allegations? I think if Parliament was just going to vote on his impeachment, there I would say, I mean, if they were going to vote over whether or not he's guilty without affording him an opportunity to argue his case, I would say he definitely has a case. He needs to be heard. His side needs to be heard both by Parliament and the public. Because even now, Kathy, even if the President were to resign tomorrow, we still would not know what is it that has happened. What was this man up to? What shady deals was he involved in a way that should set a precedent and should alert us into being more vigilant about leaders beyond the sweet words that they talk.
Mr. Godi, the issue of the panel, of course, by all indications now, is that, the findings will likely not be adopted, of course, unless there is going to be some considerable, deflections from some members of the ANC who may vote with the opposition. It's likely that even if this matter is heard tomorrow, then that report will be rejected. Is it the end of the road in as far as the accountability processes in Parliament are concerned? Or do you think there's room, particularly for members of the opposition, to go back to the initial call, which was for the establishment of an ad hoc committee that would have looked into this matter?
Well, look, Kathy, the work of the panel is part of the process that should lead to the establishment of an ad hoc committee, meaning the panel is supposed to look at submissions, and based on those submissions determine whether there's a prima facie evidence for accountability. So once Parliament adopts the report, it then paves the way to establish that committee. But once Parliament rejects the report, then it becomes, in terms of process, difficult, if not impossible, for such a committee to be established, because they have not heard the advice. Although theoretically they can still go ahead, but I think in terms of the intentions of the process, it was said that if the panel comes around and say there is no evidence, their word will not be taken lightly. And that's why it will be regrettable if the ANC were to go to Parliament and say, we reject the panel's report, because such a decision must not be taken lightly seeing that it was chaired by a retired Chief Justice, a retired judge, and a legal person. If at all we'll play politics around it, then why waste time and money on panels when you know you are merely going to take political decisions that gives no weight to the work that such eminent people have done?
Former Scopa Chair Themba Godi, that's where we'll leave it then for tonight.